afternoon, this is RFC Monkey here, presenting you this time not from the game Birds of Steel, but from the game War Thunder. War Thunder just recently released in an early release form on the Xbox One, and I've been playing the game as best as possible. I've discovered that the transition from Birds of Steel to War Thunder has not been a smooth one. I've been playing about 10 hours online in online games, and I've only got about 6 kills, so I'm making improvements, but there is a steep learning curve. Part of that steep learning curve for me is getting the controls set up just like they were set up for me in Birds of Steel. I use the alternate setup, and you may have seen before I had released a video about that, so here I am showing you in an offline flight how I think I've got my controls set up pretty well. I'm still tweaking a few things. I think you'll notice the look around is still a bit jerky. You may notice that that some of my settings are not quite as sensitive or not as sensitive as I would like to have them. And of course I find I have to adjust them a little bit in each plane. This of course is the Hurricane Mark I, a very stable plane, but I find that flying the Spitfires, it's a little bit more sensitive. So let's move on to my control settings, and I'll show you what I've done in order to set them up the way that I used to have them in Birds of Steel, which to me is an intuitive way of flying. All right, let's get into the meat of this. You start with the menu. You can see from the menu, the control menu, I've got my control set on full sim controls. I haven't adjusted anything at the top, but I do have my guns fired to the A and the B buttons like I did in Birds of Steel. I've got a couple buttons set for bombs and rockets, though I don't fly the kind of planes that use those very much, so those aren't as important to me. The main meat of this comes about from the main control axes. You'll see at the top I've got my throttle set to the left and the right button. That takes a little bit of finagling to do, but you'll select it and then click A to edit. You're going to need to come down to the relative control button and turn that on. What that does is allows you to assign a single button to a control rather than an axis. So you'll turn that on, and then you'll see I've got my increase value up near the top set to the right button, and my decrease value set to the left button. I've got my throttle control set fairly low. You can see I've got my relative control step there set to about, I think I'm adjusting it here to about, I had it at 5%. I'm setting it to 3%. What this allows you to do is every time you press the button up or down, you adjust your throttle percentage by about 3%. This allows me to have some fine control of my throttle. So I press it once, tap it once really quickly. It goes, my left button quickly goes from 100% to 97%, from 97 to 94, and so on up and down. You can set that however you like. I had it at 5%, now I've got it at 3, and I'm considering moving it to 2. So that's a fairly easy one. You do want to have your WEP set to yes. The next one is the roll axis. I've got mine set to my left, all of my flight controls are my left stick. So you'll go to that setting, you do not turn on the relative control, but you go up to the upper right, you'll see there, choose the joystick axis, and I've got my left stick set to left and right there. This way you won't see like you did with the throttle of minimum and maximum value. You can also adjust the sensitivity of these controls here, but I prefer to do that somewhere else. Make sure you hit add, by the way, when you change a control, because some of these controls control multiple things in different menus, so you want add rather than to remove. My pitch axis also on the left stick. I've got my left stick on the Y axis. That's my left stick for the up and down. Again, I don't adjust anything down below. I simply set my left stick up and down in the upper right. And here I'm going ahead and just showing you I hit add. My yaw axis is more complicated. This took me a little while. There I want my left and my right buttons. So I forget why, but I put right trigger on for the choose the control. But I went ahead and put my maximum value at my right trigger, my minimum value at my left trigger. Now this, you'll see a little bit later on, this will allow me to adjust my rudder left and right. Sort of the longer I hold it, the more it changes, but as soon as I let it go, it returns the value back to 0, which is exactly what I want. Now the next most important thing to fuddle around with are the sensitivities, and you'll see I've got my sensitivities set quite low, mostly because flying the Spitfire, plane flops around with every time you adjust something. So I've got a couple buttons right now. I've got some weird combinations. My D button left and a couple of things combined for my gear and my flaps. But mostly what I wanted you guys to see, my camera control, I got my pressing the left and the right stick in order to toggle my view for my views, although I typically only fly cockpit view. A little bit later on, you'll see that my zoom axis is my left and my right stick. I actually use my right stick to zoom in and my left stick pressing those things down to zoom back out again. And when you see the flight again, you'll see how that helps with the setup. It helps you to adjust your view as you're flying. I really prefer that one to a all-in and all-out view. Gives me a little bit more flexibility. And I've left my view in battle sticks turned on so I can adjust the views while I'm in battle. This is using my right stick now. You'll see my right stick left and right for my x-axis, and my right stick up and down. You'll see in a second for my y-axis. That way, my right stick controls my view, my left stick controls the plane, and I can do throttle, and I can do yaw with the buttons and the triggers. Most everything else, I've got a couple small things set up. I have a button for turning on and off my engine. I hardly use it very much. I've got a set of trim buttons that I'm used to from using Birds of Steel. You can try to check those out if whatever you prefer with those. I've got mine set the way I used to have it in Birds of Steel. Pretty much, I've replicated my Birds of Steel setup in here. So that's the most important part. So that to me feels the most comfortable. The only thing that's a little bit different is the fact that I have got I've swapped where I've got my throttle and my yaw control. In the end, you're going to go ahead and accept yes. There's still a few things I haven't mapped, but I will do those things later on. And now I'm going to go ahead and set back in and show you again the effects of this. So here I am flying. You can see with my left stick I can control the roll of the plane. My right stick I can look at the same time, and that's the most important part to me in a flight sim, is to be able to look and control the plane at the same time. So I can look right and roll left, I can look right and roll right, and I don't think you can just do that when you have to press a button in order to look and use the same controller for rolling as you do looking. So for me, it's important to have these two things on separate axes, and that's in the end what I've accomplished. The one thing I'm not very satisfied with currently is I think my view is a little bit too, my look around is a little bit too sensitive. Watching the video, it seems a bit jerky and a bit frustrating. I think if you're actually doing it yourself, it's a little bit less painful, but it does tend to jerk around a lot. If I'm trying to look at something very specific, sometimes it's hard to dial in just at that moment on just the thing I want to see. So I think that's a little bit of something I have to adjust in the future, but I hope you find that these settings work quite well. You've got nice control of your plane. There I went ahead and demonstrated the yaw when you fly straight. I use my trigger and it winds up jerking the plane around, but you do your yaw on a turn and you get a little bit sharper turns if you set it just right. And I think the triggers is the right place in order to control my rudder. Somewhere in here I think I attempted to, there we go, use my pressing of the right stick to zoom in and my left stick to zoom back out again. And rather than have an all or one, I can zoom in and look at my controls, or I can pick a target somewhere outside the plane and look at those, or I can return it back to the full view so I have a better view where the battlefield is. You'll be fighting mostly people who are flying on a joystick. Oh, I've got my my button mapped, to my X button, so I can quickly check that out. But you'll be flying most people who are using mouse controls and who fly third person, so they're going to have a bit of an advantage, both in control of the plane and in what they can see. But for me, the most important part of the game is the immersive experience. And once in Xbox they release the sim battles, I'll be quite ready once the game goes. This is my setup. I hope it's useful. Please pop any questions you have down in the comment section, and I'll do my best to address those. Best of luck. I'll see you guys later.